Hey there, everyone. I'm Emily, and this is my story on how I trusted a man who took away the one person that means the world to me because she found out his secret. Stick around to hear how the tale unfolds. The bond. The sun had barely risen, but the familiar chime of the alarm clock jolted Emily awake. With a contented sigh, she reached over to the other side of the bed, expecting to feel the warmth of her sister Olivia beside her. However, the empty space served as a stark reminder that Olivia was no longer there. Emily's heart sank as the memories of the previous night flooded her mind. Emily and Olivia had been inseparable since childhood, their bond forged through years of shared laughter, secrets, and dreams. They had grown up in a small town where the rhythms of daily life were as familiar as the sound of their own heartbeats. Every morning, the sisters would greet the day together, sipping their coffee on the porch and planning their adventures for the day ahead. Today, however, the porch felt eerily quiet without Olivia's infectious giggle or her playful banter. Emily's gaze drifted to the flower bush that stood in the corner of the backyard, a vibrant reminder of the life they had shared. It was under that very bush that the sisters had buried their most cherished secrets, whispering into the night and dreaming of the future. As Emily prepared for her day, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. The absence of Olivia's presence was palpable, a void that threatened to swallow her whole. The sisters had always been each other's rock, their unwavering support a constant in a world that often felt uncertain. Emily's mind wandered to the events of the previous evening, when her husband, Michael, had introduced a young woman he claimed was his niece. Olivia had been skeptical, her keen eyes scrutinizing the stranger with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Emily, however, had trusted Michael's judgment, assuming that his family had simply grown without her knowledge. Now, as she replayed the scene in her mind, Emily couldn't help but wonder if Olivia had sensed something amiss. Her sister's intuition had always been uncannily accurate, a gift that had saved them from many a precarious situation over the years. The memory of Olivia's concerned expression as she bid them good night sent a shiver down Emily's spine. With a heavy heart, Emily made her way to the kitchen, the familiar sounds of her morning routine doing little to ease the ache in her chest. As she sipped her coffee, she found herself glancing out the window, half expecting to see Olivia bounding across the yard, her laughter carrying on the breeze. But the yard remained still, the only movement coming from the gentle swaying of the flower bush. Emily's fingers tightened around the mug, her knuckles turning white. She had to believe that Olivia was out there somewhere, waiting to be found. The alternative was too unbearable to even consider. With a deep breath, Emily steeled herself for the day ahead, determined to uncover the truth and bring her sister home. As she stepped out the door, Emily's gaze lingered on the flower bush, a silent prayer for Olivia's safe return echoing in her heart. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and Emily knew that she would stop at nothing to find her sister and unravel the mystery that now shrouded their lives. The revelation. The soft patter of paws against the hardwood floor echoed through the once vibrant home, now shrouded in a pall of silence and grief. Emily glanced up from the couch, her eyes red-rimmed from endless tears, as her new companion, a loyal golden retriever, approached her with a curious tilt of his head. The dog had been a recent addition to her life, a reluctant companion that had slowly wormed its way into her heart, filling the void left by Olivia's disappearance. Emily reached out a trembling hand, running her fingers through the dog's soft fur. "Hey, buddy," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you miss her too." The dog whined softly, sensing the anguish that permeated the air, and settled down at Emily's feet, offering the only comfort he could. Days had turned into weeks since Olivia's disappearance, and the weight of the unknown had become a constant, suffocating presence. Emily had replayed the events leading up to that fateful night over and over in her mind, searching for any clue, any sign that might lead her to her sister. But the truth remained elusive, like a phantom that evaded her grasp. As the dog shifted beside her, Emily's gaze drifted to the backyard, where a lone flower bush stood in silent vigil. Olivia had always loved that bush, tending to it with the same care and devotion she showered upon her sister. Emily felt a pang in her heart, remembering the times they had sat together, watching the blooms unfurl in the warm summer breeze. Suddenly, the dog perked up, his ears pricking forward as he bounded towards the window, his nose pressed against the glass. Emily watched, her heart racing, as the dog began to scratch at the soil beneath the flower bush, digging with a fervent determination. Curiosity overriding her grief, Emily rose from the couch and made her way to the back door, stepping outside and approaching the dog cautiously. As she drew closer, the glint of something metallic caught her eye, partially buried beneath the soil. Kneeling down, she brushed away the dirt, her breath catching in her throat as she recognized the familiar shape of Olivia's cell phone. Trembling, Emily retrieved the device, her fingers fumbling as she powered it on. The screen flickered to life, and Emily's heart sank as she scrolled through the recent calls and messages. There, amidst the mundane exchanges, were several missed calls and texts from Olivia, all directed to Michael, her husband. Emily's world seemed to tilt on its axis as she pieced together the fragments of information. Olivia had been suspicious of the woman Michael had introduced as his niece, and now the evidence on the phone suggested a sinister truth. With shaking hands, Emily dialed Detective Sanchez, her voice quivering as she relayed her findings. The detective arrived within the hour, his face grave as Emily recounted the events leading up to Olivia's disappearance. He carefully examined the cell phone, his brow furrowing as he scrolled through the messages. "This is quite troubling," he murmured, his gaze meeting Emily's. "We'll need to bring your husband in for questioning." Emily's heart raced, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within her. Betrayal, anger, and a desperate need for answers all collided, leaving her reeling. As the detective made the call to summon Michael, Emily steeled herself, determined to confront the man she had once trusted with her life. When Michael arrived home, his expression one of feigned concern, Emily felt a surge of revulsion. "Where is she, Michael?" she demanded, her voice quivering with barely contained rage. "What have you done?" Michael's brow furrowed, and he reached out to touch Emily's arm, but she recoiled from his touch as if it burned. "I don't know what you're talking about, Emily," he said, his voice laced with false sincerity. "Olivia's been missing for weeks. I've been just as worried as you." The detective stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We've found Olivia's cell phone, buried in your backyard. The messages on the phone suggest she was trying to reach you in the days before her disappearance." He paused, his expression hardening. "We have reason to believe you may have been involved in her disappearance." Michael's face drained of color, and for a fleeting moment, Emily saw the mask of composure slip, revealing a glimmer of panic in his eyes. "That's impossible," he stammered, his hands trembling. "I would never hurt Olivia. She was like a sister to me." Emily felt a surge of revulsion, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "You're lying," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "Olivia was suspicious of that woman you brought around, and now she's gone. What did you do, Michael?" The detective held up a hand, silencing the confrontation. "We'll need you to come down to the station for further questioning, Mr. Blackwood," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. As Michael was led away, Emily felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The truth she had been desperately seeking was now within her grasp, but the revelation was a bitter one. Her sister's disappearance was no longer a mystery. It was a betrayal, orchestrated by the very man she had trusted to love and protect her. Sinking to the floor, Emily let the tears flow freely, her sobs echoing through the empty house. The dog whined softly, nuzzling her hand, as if sensing the depth of her anguish. In that moment, Emily knew that the bond she had shared with Olivia had been shattered, and the path to healing would be long and arduous. But with the truth finally revealed, Emily was determined to see justice served, no matter the cost. She would not stop unless Michael confessed to Olivia's disappearance, and his betrayal would not go unpunished. The road ahead was uncertain, but Emily's resolve was unbreakable. She would stop at nothing to uncover the full extent of her husband's guilt and ensure that he and his accomplice faced the consequences of their actions. The memory of Olivia's parting words echoed in Emily's mind. "Something doesn't feel right about her. Promise me you'll be careful." Pushing herself off the sofa, Emily made her way to the kitchen, desperate for the familiarity of their morning routine. As she reached for the coffee mugs, her hand trembled, and the ceramic clattered against the counter. The sound only served to amplify the emptiness that surrounded her. Olivia should be here, bustling around the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared their breakfast. Emily's eyes drifted to the kitchen window, where the flower bush in the backyard stood tall and vibrant, its delicate petals swaying gently in the breeze. It was a sight that had once brought her such joy, a symbol of the bond she shared with her sister. Now it only served as a painful reminder of Olivia's absence. Forcing herself to focus, Emily poured the coffee and carried the mugs to the kitchen table, her movements slow and deliberate. As she sat down, the familiar weight of her phone in her pocket provided a momentary comfort. She had been in constant contact with the police, providing every detail she could recall about Olivia's last known whereabouts and the strange encounter with Michael's niece. The shrill ring of the phone startled Emily, and she snatched it from her pocket, her heart pounding. "Hello," she answered, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Harrington, this is Detective Sanchez. We've received a report of a woman matching your sister's description near the old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. We're heading there now to investigate. I'd like you to come with us if you're up for it." Emily's breath caught in her throat, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "Yes, of course. I'll be right there." She hastily grabbed her keys and jacket, her mind racing with a mixture of anticipation and dread. As she rushed out the door, she couldn't help but glance back at the flower bush, silently pleading for Olivia's safe return. The drive to the warehouse was a blur, and Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. When she arrived, she spotted the police cars and an ambulance parked outside the dilapidated building. Her heart pounded in her chest as she hurried towards the scene, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of her sister. Detective Sanchez approached her, his expression somber. "Mrs. Harrington, I'm afraid we've found something you need to see." He led her towards the back of the warehouse, where a small group of officers stood, their faces etched with a mix of sorrow and discomfort. As Emily drew closer, the world seemed to slow down. There, lying on the ground, partially obscured by a tarp, was a figure that Emily recognized all too well. Her knees buckled, and she would have crumpled to the ground if not for the detective's steadying grip. "No," she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. "Olivia?" Tears streamed down her face as the reality of the situation sank in. Her sister, her closest confidant, the person she had shared every joy and sorrow with, was gone. The detective's voice, laced with sympathy, broke the deafening silence. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Harrington. We'll need you to come to the station to answer a few more questions, but take all the time you need." Emily nodded numbly, her gaze fixed on the tarp that concealed her sister's lifeless body. The world around her faded into a blur, and all she could focus on was the overwhelming sense of loss that threatened to consume her. As she turned to follow the detective, she couldn't help but glance back at the warehouse, a silent prayer on her lips for the sister she had lost. Michael was released due to lack of evidence. Since he and Olivia had always had a relationship through Emily, it wasn't suspicious that he was in contact with her. However, Detective Sanchez wasn't convinced. He decided to keep an eye on Michael, not trusting how Olivia's cell phone mysteriously ended up in the backyard. Emily paced back and forth, anxiously waiting for news from the detective about how the interrogation with Michael went. Her heart ached, desperate to know who had done this to her sister. Tears streamed down her face as she braced herself, ready to confront Michael yet again, hoping for answers, but dreading what she might uncover. Emily had to be slick. Michael was a crafty man, skilled at slipping out of tight situations. But could her husband really be capable of such a despicable act? Could he have been responsible for taking away the only family she had left? The thought chilled her to the core. With Olivia's cell phone tightly gripped in her hand, Emily waited, her mind racing. She listened for the sound of the door, bracing herself for Michael's return, determined to get the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The air in the small living room was thick with tension as Emily confronted her husband, Michael, his face a mask of feigned innocence. She gripped the cell phone tightly, the incriminating evidence burning a hole in her palm. "How could you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of grief and rage. Why did you do this to my sister, Michael? What have you done? Michael shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room. I don't know what you're talking about, Emily. Olivia's disappearance and demise is just as much of a mystery to me as it is to you. Emily shook her head, unwilling to accept his lies. The phone, Michael. I found Olivia's phone buried in the backyard with messages that prove you were involved in what happened to her. Don't even try to deny it. The detective, who had been quietly following Michael, was outside observing the exchange, gathering information to build a solid case against Michael regarding his sister-in-law's demise. Michael's composure began to crack, his eyes narrowing as he glanced between Emily. This is ridiculous. I had nothing to do with Olivia's disappearance. That phone must have been planted. Emily felt a surge of anger at his continued denials. Stop lying, Michael. The evidence is right here. You and that woman you introduced as your niece. You're both involved in this, aren't you? The detective cleared his throat, his gaze unwavering. Mr. Harrington, we'll need you to cooperate with us and tell us everything you know about what happened to Olivia. We'll also be executing a search warrant for your home and property. As the detective made the necessary arrangements, Emily watched Michael's face, searching for any sign of remorse or guilt. But all she saw was a cold, calculating expression that sent a chill down her spine. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as the investigation intensified. Forensic teams combed through the Harrington home and backyard, uncovering more evidence that linked Michael and the mysterious woman to Olivia's tragic end. Emily sat in the courtroom, her heart pounding as the trial began. She listened intently as the prosecutor laid out the case, detailing the incriminating evidence found on Olivia's cell phone and the witness statements that corroborated their involvement. Michael and the woman, now identified as his mistress, Samantha, sat side by side, their expressions defiant. Emily watched as they tried to downplay their roles, claiming the evidence was circumstantial and that they had nothing to do with Olivia's fate. But the testimony of the detective and the forensic experts painted a damning picture. The phone records showed a series of calls and text messages between Michael and Samantha, discussing their plans to get rid of Olivia. The soil analysis from the backyard matched the dirt found on Olivia's clothing, and the dog's persistent scratching at the flower bush had led to the discovery of the crucial evidence. As the trial progressed, Emily found herself reliving the painful memories of her sister's untimely demise. The courtroom became a stage for the unfolding tragedy, and she was forced to confront the harsh reality of her husband's betrayal. Finally, the moment of reckoning arrived. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom as he pronounced the verdict. Michael Harrington and Samantha Winters were found guilty of the murder of Olivia Harrington. Emily felt a sense of both relief and anguish as the sentence was handed down. Michael and Samantha were sentenced to life in prison, their freedom taken away as punishment for their heinous crime. As she left the courtroom, Emily couldn't help but feel a bittersweet sense of guilt. The truth had been revealed, and justice had been served, but the void left by Olivia's absence would never be filled. The pain of her loss was a constant companion, a reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human betrayal. The aftermath. The once vibrant and welcoming home that Emily shared with her sister Olivia now felt hollow, its warmth diminished by the gaping absence that Olivia's disappearance had left in its wake. As the trial concluded and the harsh verdicts were handed down, sentencing both Michael and his accomplice Samantha to life in prison, Emily found herself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. The initial relief of seeing her husband and his lover held accountable for their heinous acts was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming grief that consumed her. Olivia's laughter, her infectious smile, and the shared moments of sisterly love that had once filled the house were now but distant echoes, haunting Emily's every step. Emily found herself withdrawing from the world, unable to muster the energy to face the sympathetic gazes and well-meaning platitudes of those around her. The golden retriever she had adopted, a constant companion in her darkest hours, became her sole source of comfort, its gentle presence a soothing balm against the ache in her heart. Seeking solace, Emily immersed herself in the rhythmic motions of caring for the dog, finding solace in the simple act of brushing its soft fur or taking it for long walks through the familiar streets. It was during these quiet moments that she would allow herself to reflect on the life she and Olivia had shared, the dreams they had once nurtured together, and the future that had been so cruelly snatched away. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's grief evolved, transforming from a raw, all consuming anguish into a dull, persistent ache that she carried with her like a heavy burden. She found herself seeking professional help, engaging in therapy sessions that provided a safe space for her to confront the depth of her loss and the betrayal that had shattered her world. Slowly, with the support of her therapist and the unwavering presence of her canine companion, Emily began to rediscover the strength within herself. She started to honor Olivia's memory in small but meaningful ways, donating to local charities that had been close to her sister's heart and volunteering at an animal shelter where she could offer comfort to those in need, just as the dog had done for her. One particularly poignant moment came when Emily decided to create a memorial garden in her backyard, centered around the flower bush that had been the catalyst for uncovering the truth about Olivia's fate. She carefully tended to the plants, watching as they blossomed and thrived, a testament to the enduring spirit of her sister. It was here, amidst the fragrant blooms, that Emily would often sit, talking to Olivia as if she were just beyond the veil, sharing her triumphs and her struggles, and finding solace in the belief that her sister was listening. As time passed, Emily's grief began to transform, no longer a crippling weight, but a bittersweet reminder of the love she had shared. She found herself smiling more readily, her laughter no longer tinged with sorrow, but infused with a newfound appreciation for the precious moments life had to offer. The dog, ever faithful, remained by her side, a constant companion on her journey towards healing. Its unwavering presence and unconditional love served as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was still light to be found. In the quiet moments, when the house felt too large and the silence too deafening, Emily would turn to the dog, drawing strength from its steadfast loyalty. It was in these moments that she felt closest to Olivia, as if her sister's spirit had found a way to reach her through the gentle creature. Though the scars of this ordeal would never fully heal, Emily knew that Olivia's spirit lived on, guiding her through the darkness. She vowed to honor her sister's memory by living a life filled with the same warmth, kindness, and resilience that had defined Olivia. As the sun set on this chapter of her life, Emily looked towards the future, determined to find a way to move forward, one step at a time, with the knowledge that her sister's love would forever be the light that guided her path. As the years passed, Emily's life, while forever changed, began to take on a new shape, one that honored Olivia's memory while allowing Emily to find her own path forward. She became a fierce advocate for victims of domestic violence, using her story to inspire others and to ensure that no one would have to endure the same heartbreak she had suffered. In the end, Emily's journey was not one of closure, but of learning to live with the weight of her loss. The bond she had shared with Olivia would forever be a part of her, a guiding light that illuminated the path ahead, even in the darkest of times. And as she looked out over the thriving garden, the dog at her feet, Emily knew that the love she and Olivia had shared would continue to blossom, a testament to the unbreakable spirit of sisterhood.